Welcome to You've Been Granted, a podcast hosted by Brian McDonald, CEO of Granted, which helps advisors unlock equity compensation wealth for the individuals they serve, enabling them to make confident, timely decisions. In this podcast series, Brian welcomes experienced leaders, visionaries, and influencers in the world of equity compensation and financial advice. Today, Brian is joined by Pam Krueger, founder of Wealthramp, a complimentary referral service to the best personally vetted, independent fiduciary advisors. Pam is also the creator and co-host of Money Talk on PBS. And now, Brian, over to you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the inaugural podcast, the You've Been Granted podcast. And I'm so excited to be here with all of you today and to be here with Pam Krueger to talk about some amazing things going on in the industry and certainly learning from one of the OGs of the business. So before we get started, I thought I would just share a little bit about the podcast and what we're doing at Granted. I've had the pleasure of working with so many wonderful people across the industry for decades. That's how old I am and how long I've been in this industry. For decades that we've been working on the equity compensation space, and the goal of Granted and the goal of the You've Been Granted podcast is to elevate the conversation between advisors, the issuers that issue equity compensation, and the individuals who receive it. And couldn't think of a better way to get started than with Pam. Pam is, again, as I mentioned, one of the OGs of the industry. She's been an investor advocate for years and has been one of the loudest voices in the industry about working with advisors that really meet your needs, meet you where you are, and certainly a very fee-only approach to the business. So welcome, Pam. Thank you for being our first to join us on the You've Been Granted podcast.
I love it. Thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me.
And so I'm going back a few seconds ago to where you left off as you narrowed down to equity compensation. One of the questions I hear a lot is, I just got my first grant. I'm new in my career. Maybe I'm working at a tech company and I just got my first grant and I'm not really sure what to do with it. Do I need an advisor then, or do I have to wait till I get to, say, $500,000 and granted, stock and stock options before I need an advisor? How do you help people think through that scenario?
Yeah, I like the way you asked the question, because it really isn't necessarily about age. I like the fact that you said they're new in their career, regardless of age, because you could be 50 and be new to stock compensation. So the question is, who should be working with a financial advisor, especially when somebody's just received equity comp? So it could be, you could be in your 30s, your 20s, 30s, 40s, or, older. And, I think that the key is to really look at what your whole picture looks like. How complex do you feel things are? How much understanding do you have? You can get some really good education about your equity compensation beyond the educational component and the informational. At what point do you feel like you need a partner to actually do some financial planning around this? That's a really personal decision. Age has nothing to do with it. Complexity has everything to do with it. Sometimes you just feel like you're getting overwhelmed. You've just made a career pivot. Your spouse may have made some changes. You might not have a huge income. You might not have a huge 401k balance, but you still feel like you need a partner to kind of help you plan and map out what it is you want to accomplish. And you want to also use that financial advisor. That's why it has to be someone who understands stock options, because you want to be able to bring that into it and say, okay, given that I have this and I have these this equity compensation, I need to consider all things and look at the blind spots. What am I missing here? And maybe the second part of that is, do you have to be wealthy, to hire an advisor? And the answer is absolutely not. The advisor's fees are going to be reasonable. They're going to be affordable. And I am going to refer you to an advisor who you can afford, because you're going to tell me so much about yourself and the questions I'm asking that I'm only going to refer you to advisors who you can actually afford.
That makes a ton of sense. And my guess is advisors would be excited about working with individuals that are receiving equity comp for the first time. One, because of the complexity that you described, but two, it says they're probably going places in their career. And, I think all advisors would like to be part of that journey with their clients. So that's well said. Every podcast I listen to nowadays, at the end, they get to this place and they throw in, what about AI? So rather than, do that question at the end, I thought I'd start a little earlier in the process because I think it's something we have to think about along the way. I personally use, ChatGPT or Claude all the time now, like almost everything I do, whether it's, fixing my car or anything else, it's my go-to place. So I gotta believe that individuals who are getting equity compensation or just thinking about financial advice in general are going to some of these do-it-yourself tools. Maybe not all of them are AI, maybe there are other tools online, but certainly I know that that's got to be a big Q&A section on some of these AI tools. And so how do you feel about that? And how should potentially clients think about using those tools?
I just wrote an article about this. I love this question. And you know what? For me personally, oh my God, my guilty secret is like, I feel like my relationship with ChatGPT is like, it knows me and I'm going to ask questions that are really personal and it's going to be about everything. It's going to be about whatever it might be. And I feel like, I like you, ChatGPT. But here's what I wrote about. When asked the question, can I really count on ChatGPT to even build a budget for me? When it comes to money and answering questions and making financial decisions, and the answer is, am I using it or are advisors using it? Should you be using it? Yes, absolutely yes. And absolutely no, do not take ChatGPT at its word. Oh my God, I promise you. You've heard about and seen, especially this audience, hallucinations. So, my God. I remember trying to build a budget when I first started using ChatGPT, and I thought this is going to be a piece of cake. It's going to make it so easy for me. I just wanted to test it out. Brian, I was so frustrated. It made mistake after mistake after mistake. It wouldn't go back and correct it. And the logic back in the beginning needed to be updated, all of it. Now, I just read some very, very recent research on this. And how often does ChatGPT get answers wrong? Take a guess. What percentage of the time they're wrong?
20% of the time?
Percent.
Oh, even bigger than I thought.
So
I actually guessed higher than I really thought because I thought you were saying it was going to be higher, but 35 is quite a bit.
35 is enough to screw you up because if you're asking your most important money questions, you could get thrown off track quite a bit. I see it happen all the time, even like looking back on history and saying, hey, how many years did the stock market do X, Y, or Z? I was playing around with it. It was wrong almost as often as it was correct. Okay, that said, there are some really cool new tools that use AI for stock compensation, like modeling software, like I'm talking about equity dashboards. Everything has gotten so good. This. Yes. And those kinds of tools can help you, figure out how to stress test some scenarios and even flag some deadlines. That's incredibly valuable. So, for me, if you're a person who really likes DIY platforms, like with Granted, this is giving you like a huge head start because stress testing what if scenarios is what financial planning is. That's exactly what it is. And what ChatGPT can do for you, okay, it can show you what's possible, that it can do beautifully, but it cannot tell you what's right for you because it doesn't know. Even if you tell it, it's still not going to factor in if you're planning to buy a house next year, if your partner just lost their job, if you're holding too much company stock and you need to diversify, or how does this equity fit into your retirement, with your taxes, with your estate plan, even with your childcare costs and cash needs? So it's not going to do that. It's not going to replace an advisor. So as long as you use it with all of those caveats in mind, then I think that, it's a huge time saver.
Yeah. Thanks for saying that. And you're right. At Granted, we're building AI natively from the ground up because we do believe in the power of the technology. But we're doing it in a very deterministic way, making sure that the models that we're running, taking the assumptions and building the outcomes and recommendations for advisors and their clients is very, very much based upon kind of the rigor and the algorithms that can be tested, not probabilistic in a way that is focused on we think the model thinks this could be right, because I think that's where the hallucinations really start to come in. And I think one of the things that scares me, Pam, and maybe it sounds like you share it, but one of the things that scares me is that if you don't know what you don't know, then you accept whatever you get back from your AI assistant. And if it's hallucinating, you wouldn't know enough to challenge it or say it's wrong. Like, you do know enough. And so when you go in and you run questions and it gives you an answer, you can look at it and say, hey, that's not right. But some people don't know that. The other thing I would say, and again, this is something that I believe is money is emotional. It's personal. And to your point around like knowing your situation is really, really important. And I don't think that AI assistants are there yet. And I don't think that you'll want to put all your personal information out on OpenAI or any of those models. Maybe never, but certainly not right now. And so I think, it's going to be a while, I think, before we get to a place where we feel 100% good about everything that it's telling us, but also, how I should interface it with my personal information.
Exactly. And, like you pointed out too, it's almost like the information you're putting in, the information you're going to get back in answers is only going to be as good as the information that you're asking. And if you have blind spots and you don't know what to ask and you're missing that contextual education, and, that's hard for employers, right? In the workplace, it's hard for employers to figure out where to draw the line with employees about how much education and how much advice that they can actually, how do they do that? How do they make that work?
Well, and let's go there. So I know that, being in this industry for quite some time, this was a challenge we ran into with the stock plan administrators and HR professionals. They're delivering over $400 billion in equity grants in the industry, just in the U.S. alone each year. But education still seems to be a bit of a struggle.
Yeah.
And probably even beyond education, getting into real advice. What should I do? I'm 75% concentrated in my company stock in terms of my net worth. What should I do is a question that oftentimes HR professionals and stock plan administrators can't really answer. But
Right.
what is the role, in your opinion, of the employer from the standpoint of education and advice?
I like the way you walked into this, because now you got me visualizing. You are an employee. You want the best explanation of everything that's objective. I don't want to be confused. Don't overwhelm me. And then when you get that information, your next step is to go, okay, well, how do I use this information and put it into practice in my private personal life? That's where the advice comes in. So again, the employer is kind of in a tough position. How do I walk that line? And it starts with understanding on both sides, the employer and the employee, understanding your employer is not your financial advisor. They're not your daddy. They're giving you the opportunity, and then they're giving you enough contextual and hopefully education and information about what you have as a benefit. But then to get access, this is why I created Wealthramp the way that I created it, to work with employers and to work with you guys, is I want you to think about, you have this, even if you're a startup and you're working virtually, but the building itself, the company itself, and everything that's inside of it, with the 401k, with all the stock comp, all of that. And then on the outside of the building, that's me. I'm like the food truck in the parking lot, that big pink truck that you see out there that says advice when you want it, not in your face, not trying to force it on you. And yes, you have to pay for it. So what I am is I'm sitting out there adjacent, close enough to the employer, but I'm not in your face and I'm not in your business and I'm not walking around inside your company. And I don't have access to your plan data unless you give it to me. So that means that you voluntarily, all on your own, Brian, you get to go, you know what? Think I'm ready for some advice. HR person, where do I go? Oh, see that pink food truck in the parking lot? That's where you're going to go. It's Pam Krueger. She's rigorously vetted 240 advisors, and of those, 70 are stock option specialists that work with startup employees at every phase, every age, every income level. She will match you with the right one. See, to me, that's an elegant solution. It keeps me out of your hair, out of the employer's hair, right? And out of their business. But it puts me close enough so that the employees don't have to say, well, you kicked me to the curb. You're not giving me any advice.
Right. Yeah. And I know having worked for, two large companies with record keeping systems, I know the education piece was always something that we cared deeply about in order to help individuals get at least the education they need so that they could take the next step and decide about an advisor. Do I do this on my own? And who do I work with? And so, it's a constant, I think, balance that the employer is trying to find. And maybe just to pull on the thread a little bit further, though, because one thing that I hear a lot from employers, or employees, I should say, is what about taxes? And do I need to go find a tax advisor and a financial advisor? Can a financial advisor help me with both? And maybe even further to that, Pam, what are some of the mistakes that individuals often make when it comes to taxes and thinking about their equity compensation?
I should have mentioned that earlier too, is you're asking the key question. Do you need like a separate tax advisor in addition to a financial advisor? No. This type of advisor, remember what we said back in the beginning, advisors specialize. They're all different. And within the fee-only advisor realm, they are even more different. So within that, within that channel, we need to find the advisors who are already tax specialists working with RSUs, working with even ISOs, working with complex scenarios to avoid AMT. And I think that one of the biggest mistakes overall is when employees are disillusioned, I want to say, and it's easy to get disillusioned. They're kind of confusing their wealth in terms of their equity with cash. And they don't understand that there is a process and all of that. And everybody's journey is going to be a little bit different. But, some common mistakes are, just kind of believing that just because you have a grant, if they think, oh, I've got this grant, so therefore I own. Yeah, not yet.
Right.
So it's a process, and they may not really understand completely, what the vesting schedule is and what exercising options and costs and what triggers taxes. So that's like the biggest thing. So, but the short answer to that question is, in my case, with our food truck, with Wealthramp, with you, with Granted, yes, you already have a built-in tax advisor inside your financial advisor. It's all one.
Yeah. And as the supplier to your food truck at Granted, we think it's both. You need to understand the tax impact, right? You want to optimize to good outcomes as it relates to tax, but we think having a strategy alongside of not just tax planning alone, having a strategy, and it gets back to the thing you said earlier around goals, right? I mean, maybe your goals for retirement are not the same goals for your equity compensation. Maybe initially it's just about buying a house or paying for your kids' college, and so it could have very different, the meaning for your equity compensation could be very different than your overall financial plan, or at least just part of that journey, just kind of the short-term part of it.
Yep, it's just another form of money that has a clock on it. and has some locks around it. And you just have to kind of figure out, how does that fit into my world? So what's going to be right for the person sitting next to you who you've been working with for 5 years and you think you're exactly the same? You're not the same. You might have a child on the autism spectrum that needs a retirement that you have to fund for that loved one's life.
Completely. And it's that's why the water cooler thing scares me a little bit, if that's where you're getting your advice, because the advice I might be getting from Pam while we're filling up our water bottle may be very different than the advice I need. And I have a special needs daughter that that's been a big part of our financial planning throughout life.
Exactly.
And so my experience is very different than maybe my peer group where they're not in a similar situation. But why don't you have 240 fully vetted advisors that you work with, 70, which is a lot. And I offline, I know you call them equity compensation ninjas. So certainly experts in the field, but any stories come to mind where, someone has really helped someone with a major life decision and the advisor was a big part of, how they worked through that you'd love to tell?
Yeah, I think of a story that I wrote about where John Chapman, one of our advisors, was talking to had a client who was a vice president at a healthcare startup. Had about 350,000 ISOs, incentive stock options.
Yeah.
And they were worth about something like, $6 million after an IPO. So like a lot of people, he planned to sell some of the shares, not retire, but didn't realizing that exercising and selling right away for him could have triggered a $3 million tax liability immediately. So with
especially on the ISOs, yeah.
Right. That's the tricky part. So with the help of John, who's a fee only fiduciary advisor ninja, he ended up being able to look at side-by-side scenarios. So this is important. This is an important piece of it. This isn't just an advisor saying, oh, don't do this, don't do that. And then you don't really learn anything from that because you're walking away going, oh, you told me what to do. It's great. It's even better. You're smart. You want to know why. And you don't want to know every little detail about the tax laws, but you do want to know, hey, show me a side-by-side scenario. What would happen if I did this a smarter way, exercise and hold, and spread, and spread sales over time, or waiting a year to get, capital gains treatment, how that's going to save. Well, guess what? In this case, it saved him about $1.5 million in taxes he would have paid. So with a simple shift in timing and planning, he actually we found out later, he bought a vacation home and got himself set up to basically take care of funding the rest of his retirement goals for down the road, maybe 10 years down the road. So the key is, that the advisor knows the rules, the advisor knows how to model, the advisor sits down with you side by side. Again, this advisor, he or she is going to be a partner in helping make your equity decisions in context with the rest of your life, not in a vacuum. And then if you're married and you're going to go home and you're going to be able to tell your wife, or your wife's, you're going to go home, I'm going to tell my husband, I can actually explain to you, husband of mine, I can actually explain to you what just happened because I actually understand it. It's a very different takeaway than working with somebody who says, here, I'll take care of that for you. And then you walk away going, well, I know I'm okay, but I don't know why.
Yeah, you're bringing up, visions of my high school math teacher saying, like, show your work. You can't just give me the answer. You've got to show me how you did the work. And
in that class,
at times I did better than others.
I didn't love math until I fell in love with math in college. Hated it.
Yeah.
Hated it. And it was show the work. I was like, oh.
It's a totally not related to this, but I just read a stat the other day about how like ChatGPT and other LLMs, like the usage really went down at the end of May. And then kind of stayed down the summer and it's now starting to go back up again because kids left school, and just showing you how much they're using these AI tools to help with what they're doing. And obviously we're progressive people. We want them to learn the new technology, but it is a long way from Mrs. Edelstein, who used to make me show my math in high school. Yeah, show my work. But so look, advisors are part of. I mean, I know you do a ton with financial literacy, and I was pleased to learn that you're even mentoring some individuals, young adults that want to be in wealth management at a major university. I think that's awesome. But doesn't the advisor kind of continue to play a role? I mean, think about the young engineer that she just got her first couple of equity grants, and she, wants to understand, to your point, more than just get the answer. Like, what role does the advisor play in that education or literacy component of what they do?
Now what we're starting to describe is the realm of exceptional advice that becomes so valuable that this only can come from advisors who are humble, and they are not overly, they're not taking on too many clients. So they've got the right number of clients so that they can spend a lot of time with each client doing things like, hey, let's talk about what this equity grant, let's talk about what this could be worth to you in real life. Let's talk about the risk if you held too long. Here's the tax trap that you could fall into, and here's how we're going to skirt it and avoid it. Here's how this fits or doesn't fit into all of your actual financial plans that you see for your lifestyle. And so those kinds of discussions happen because the advisor is super generous. He or she is really knowledgeable, but they're super generous. And what you walk away with, you don't even know it. You're going to walk away gaining such nuggets of knowledge. Think of it like a breadcrumb trail, and you're just like going along, and 5 years down the road, you will not recognize yourself. You will not recognize your conversations. You will have evolved into a much more sophisticated investor. And you'll go, how'd that happen? I didn't take the class. Well, you kind of did, because you were working with the right advisor who was so generous that they taught you in little nuggets that you could actually digest, because it was information that was real world. You really needed it, and you're not going to forget it.
Yeah. Something you said earlier about advisors being humble, I think to the point you just made, the best advisors are also secure enough that by sharing their work and educating along the way doesn't mean that the individual is going to leave them and do it themselves. It usually means it emboldens the relationship, and one that will last for life because you care enough to educate me along the way versus just tell me what to do. And so I think you described that incredibly well.
The key criteria, and I'll just tell you really quickly, the advisors sitting here in this food truck called Wealthramp, all of them, that's part of my vetting. They have to have humility, and they have to be willing to teach and educate, or they cannot be part of this network. And so this is why when people ask me, we'll just go to a fee-only fiduciary advisor. And I say, well, yeah, that's the right starting point. But not every single fee-only fiduciary advisor is going to be highly qualified, nor are they going to be able to be in a position to be that generous that you walk away with that much. And these folks in this food truck here, these advisors have a 98% client retention rate, 98%.
Wow. It gets back to that, picking the right one, the right fit for you, that Goldilocks scenario, right? Like having, 2 or 3 that you can think about to make sure that
that's where I help. Yeah, that's where I help. Because if you tried to go out and do it on your own, look, it took me a year and a half. And I know what I'm doing. I've been doing this since I was 24, and I'm a lot older than that now. So I know what to look for. And it took me a year and a half to curate this network.
Yeah, I love that. What tools or frameworks, Pam, do you use, or do your advisors use when thinking about like vesting and dilution and valuation and, all these things that get to risk and understanding of equity compensation that most individuals, don't really understand. Do you guys use any tools or frameworks in this space?
Yeah, all the advisors that are truly working, with up to speed, working with clients, who have these scenarios that they need to run, they've all chosen their own. There are a few tools out there. They're for advisors, and they've chosen to, I want to say, sort of put them together into their own proprietary mix of what they want to use with their normal financial planning software. So it depends on what software talks to what. It also depends on the age too, because if someone's getting close to retirement, it's going to be a little bit different scenario modeling and planning than for someone who's in their 20s, right, who has absolutely no savings, but has a high income, but also has high debt and has, compensation. So they're all going to use different tools that are in their own, but I will say that they've created their own proprietary sort of mix, if you will.
Yeah. And I think it's important, we're launching the Granted product in November. Hopefully that becomes...
It's very helpful to advisors.
Yeah, well received. We also acquired a company called Stock Operator that's been doing this for a while that is in market now. But, one of the biggest...
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah.
That you just hit on. I just had to say it while I haven't read it. You just named it. I mean, I wasn't going to give brand names, but that's one of the proprietary tools that's really most popular.
Yeah, it's a great one, and I think we're proud for Stock Operator to be part of the Granted family. And I think one of the biggest challenges we have is advisors. Very good advisors oftentimes feel like they have to build their own spreadsheet because they don't have the tools in place to do this well. And so that's one of the biggest challenges we're trying to solve for in the industry is make it repeatable, make it high quality, curate the message so that the advisor can understand, and therefore their end client can understand, what's going on in the modeling, because these things are and can be super complex. And maybe that leads to my next question, Pam. I mean, you described how personal advice can and is, but sometimes, there's not one advisor, one size fits all, meaning the same advisor might not be good for like an early career employee or a senior executive or even a founder entrepreneur, which, all three of those individuals could be very different. So how do you think about and what's your approach to that tailored advice need?
Yep. The tailored advice is huge. The tools that you just mentioned are huge. And I just was going to tack on one little thought there that you made me think of at the end of talking about the tools. It's like you are putting like the best tools in the hands of the best advisors. That's important. Think about it, because the best tools in the hands of the advisors who don't know what they're doing are still the best tools, but they need to know how to use it. And what you're doing is you're putting the best tools in the hands of the best advisors. In terms of differences and also access to advice too, because even in tech and biotech where equity comp is just really everywhere,
it's almost ubiquitous with those two industries. Yeah.
But even inside those companies, only some employees are really going to understand what they've got. So sometimes you're going to have founders in the C-suite, getting catered to. Oh, let's make sure you understand this. Let's make sure you have the best tax advice. Let's bring it to you, right? They serve it up. What about the employees who are younger, who don't have that history? They don't have that understanding. They don't have that context, and nobody's there to serve it up. So they have to go find. And that's why we want them to have this access, because they do need an advisor who is going to be accustomed to be able to explain and educate and work with people who have, income, no assets, versus the advisor who's been around a long time, who's accustomed to working with the executives who already have 30 million. They're two different people. They're two different advisors. And I don't want to go by age, but let's say the more senior you are, the executive, the directors, the founders, they are much more likely to have had tax advice served up to them. So, there is a little demographic difference There's industry by industry, there's a difference, because in older industries like manufacturing or, healthcare, which is becoming more tech, equity is not quite as common. So there's less baseline knowledge across the board. And then, again, we just kind of covered by role, but I'll also say that by demographic, this really bothers me because it's serious. Studies have shown, I think Aspen Institute did a study that women, if you're Black, you're a woman, or if you're Latino employee, you're first generation professional, you are less likely to negotiate or even have any understanding how to negotiate for equity. You're less likely to be receiving clear guidance, let alone advice from any access point. And you're more likely to leave money on the table because you're not ever really told how to make the most of this. And for some of us, or some people, I think with me, I want to speak for myself, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity and I don't want to blow it.
Yeah. And that happens from time to time. We've seen people not take advantage of the equity compensation they're getting fully in a way that could be life changing in the other direction. Just as in for another conversation over time. I mean, just as some people that get the vesting and receive the proceeds from the sale of the stock or the exercise of the option and sell of the stock, and they go out immediately and buy something that probably doesn't mean as much as it would if they would have reinvested it in a diversified portfolio or had an opportunity to do some things. So I think the education is all the way around. It's not just what are these instruments and how do I think about them, but also what do I do with the money that's really going to help me kind of reach my financial goals and dreams. And certainly that's the conversation that we're so excited about orienting advisors and their clients and the issuers to. So I have one off the script question, Pam. You can answer this any way you want, but what would you tell Pam, a younger Pam, just getting started in her career? What would you tell her to think about in terms of all the places that she's going to go, but how to think about that from a financial standpoint? What advice would you give to the 22-year-old Pam coming out of college?
Just don't fall into the trap of thinking that any particular money decision, any particular financial decision is in a vacuum. Perfect example real quick is 401k plan. And even though I was a stockbroker and I had my 401k, I still had this tendency to look at, I'm going to look over here at my 401k choices in the menu and I'm going to choose. And then I put my head up and look outside and go, I forgot to consider my whole life. Darn. So I think that it's just recognizing that you can have someone to talk to, no matter how old you are, no matter how little money you have, even if you have no assets, no savings, having somebody to talk to, getting a fresh eyes perspective and getting someone else to come in the mix with you and walk you through can save. I wish I had done that myself and saved myself a lot of grief if I had talked things through about, what I want to do, what I have access to, how do I make the most of it, and not just drink my own Kool-Aid. And us in the business, we have a tendency to drink our own Kool-Aid. And I've learned, you never want to do that. You want to ask, but don't just go to anybody. You got to do the homework to make sure you're asking the right person for the right kind of advice, because free advice that comes from the wrong source is very expensive.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. Thank you so much for that last parting words of wisdom and advice. And thank you very much for being on the You've Been Granted podcast. Again, it's just a pleasure to talk to you and get to know you. What you're doing for the industry is terrific. You can find Pam at wealthramp.com. You can also find Granted at grantedequity.com, also on all of our socials. and we'll have a YouTube channel where you can see Pam and I having this discussion live. We have some other exciting guests coming in the future, but so grateful, Pam, that you've been willing to be our inaugural guest, and look forward to many more conversations with you in the future.
I love being the first. Thanks, Brian.
Bye, Pam.
Bye for now.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of You've Been Granted with your host, Brian McDonald, and our special guest, Pam Krueger. To explore more episodes from our podcast series, visit grantedequity.com or find us on Spotify and YouTube. We appreciate you tuning in and look forward to having you with us on the next episode of You've Been Granted.